The Aaron Harber Show.
Second biggest challenge is defense. We spend more on national defense in this country than the next 17 largest countries combined. Combined. That includes both Russia and China and 15 other countries. That is crazy. I personally think that America is bearing a disproportionate responsibility for global world peace. And I don't think America can afford to be the world's policeman. And I think Admiral Mullen, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for both President Bush and President Obama, got it right when he said our greatest national security problem is these deficits, because they will consume every dollar of resource that we have. Let me just give you one example of how crazy our situation is. America has a treaty today. The treaty is with Taiwan that will protect Taiwan if they're invaded by the Chinese. There's only one problem with that. We'll have to borrow the money from China to do it. It's crazy. We got to wake up.
If anyone believes that we're hollowing out the Defense Department or the defense budget, the only thing being hollowed out is your brain. And let me tell you why. We asked them, how many contractors do you have in the Defense Department that you were involved with and paying? They said, well, it's quite a range, actually. We said, well, what is it? And they said it's between 1 million and 10 million. That is quite a range, you'll have to admit. And our Kent Conrad, the Democrat, asked for an audit. They said, we are unauditable. There's no way to audit the contractors in defense. And the person you don't know somewhere, and you say, what do you do? And they say, I'm a defense contractor. Nothing wrong with that. It's an honorable adventure, but the cost of it is beyond your comprehension. If there are 1 million to 10 million of them and no audit, think of what part of that $740 billion budget that is. Now, here's one for you. If I'd stayed in the reserves another 6 or 8 years, I would be a military retiree. Those are people who've been in 20 years. They deserve all the care we can give. They gave up lots of things and life and family. And they have their own health care plan. You don't know about it. It's called TRICARE. The premium is $470 a year and no copay, and takes care of all dependents and costs you and me $53 billion a year. So start thinking. And don't think people don't check our figures, because we irritate people, but we don't do mush or BS. So the next time you hear that call about hollowing out the defense budget, at least you'll have some figures about what's real and what's myth. We don't do myth, we do math.
How about the military? You have a military budget that, if you combine the Department of Defense, Veterans Affairs,
I looked at that.
the DOE component,
Yeah.
we're heading towards $1 trillion a year.
Well, that's a little high. That's a little high. But one of the things I want you to consider is that when Mr. Obama became president, he asked the Department of Defense to squeeze out a considerable amount of money. I don't have the sum in my head, but it was quite a bit in overhead, and they did so. And if you look at what the Chinese spend, and you say, gee, suppose their yuan really was worth what it should be worth. It would be about 40% more. And you look at the pace of growth in what they're spending, the Chinese will be spending in real terms what we're spending on defense now, after those cuts, by 2020, 2022, and they will have spent it on more modern stuff. Now, granted, they don't know how to build an aircraft carrier. That thing is a fraud. You know, they don't even have planes to land on it. It's a very nice thing.
Yeah, but so what?
But still, no, it's
isn't the real question? Hold on.
Hold on a second. It is a real question. It is a real question as to whether you're going to be able to counter. China has not been an expansionist society in the past, but it has different motivations now. It has virtually no domestic oil and has to go abroad for it. Do you want to live in a world where China has more of a navy than we do?
Okay, so the question that I don't think's been answered is what do we want from the Department of Defense?
We want it to be able to secure ourselves, and that means to deal with things like terrorism, to be able to counter aggression against the United States.
Can you do that for $400 billion?
I don't think you can and have the kind of Navy you need. That's my bottom line.
Okay, and I would say you don't know.
I think I do know. We were already cutting down the size of the fleet in a world where the Chinese will have as much money to spend as we do now.
We don't know what we're getting for the Department of Defense budget.
Well, we don't know what we're getting in a lot of government programs that are very large because they're not market-oriented.
Well, I'm just saying, for example, the Department of Defense has never been audited, right?
Well, what are you going to benchmark it against?
Well, where do you start then?
I don't know. That's an important question with a lot of government programs. It's one of the reasons the state universities are so darn inefficient is because there's nothing to benchmark them against in the private sector. That is one of the fundamental conundrums of economics, is how do you benchmark the provision of a public good? That's like asking, what is the nature of God?
2 points. One is, whatever we want our government to do, over the long run, we have to pay for it.
Yep.
And that's the thing that we have not realized and not faced up to. We want lots more, or at least somebody does, from our government than we have been willing to pay for. And that is the serious problem that started this conversation. We are living beyond our means in the future. But the other point is this. Whatever we decide is the right proportion of our GDP to be spending on the federal government, or whatever we decided in the last few years, we're going to have to rethink it in the face of this avalanche of seniors. That is a serious question. If we thought the right percentage was, as Marty said, 19 over the last few years, then we're going to have to face up to the fact that we have going to have half again as many seniors as we've had in the past. And we have made promises to them, for all good reasons, about Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. So those promises are going to be expensive, and we have to figure out how we're going to finance them.
The third biggest challenge, is Social Security. Al Simpson and I don't want to fix the deficit on the backs of the old people. We are the old people, We don't. That's not why we want to do it. What we want to do is make it sustainably solvent for you all, so it's actually there, so we can meet the promises that we've made.
If we do nothing with Social Security and we're not balancing the budget on the backs of poor old seniors, throwing old ladies in their wheelchairs from the tops of buildings, busting the bedpans in the VA hospital, we really aren't up to that. And we say, look, the trustees of the system have told us and moved up the date that in the year 2033, that's 21 years from now, you're going to waddle up to the window and get a check for 25% less. What's smart about that? And the longer you stay in the game, you guys out there, 21 years from now, you're in the prime of life. But when you're 65, you'll probably waddle up the window and get a check for 40% less, because the law says you'll receive only the payable benefit. That's a hell of a lot different than the scheduled benefit. There was a person that testified for Erskine and me. He said he speaks to young people all over the United States. And as they walk in, he gives them a lollipop. And they all look at him. And then when he gets them settled, he said, now hold up your lollipop. You're wondering why you're holding that? Yeah, we are. He said, you're suckers, all of you. Every one of you. Well, one of our commission members said, that's the most disgusting thing I've ever heard the person tell to young people. And he said, look, you do your thing, I'll do mine. But if these young people haven't got this figured out, there's no hope for them.
We really need to think, what is it that we need for the United States to be able to do? The government can do many things. One of the things it can do is to provide and respond to demands from people. People like Social Security because it responds to a demand they have for an insurance system that covers them in case they become disabled. And we're seeing a very big problem with people who are in their 50s, unable to find work, who are now on disability rolls because they face too many physical disabilities to do that. So I think it's very hard to disentangle this conversation without first admitting that part of the conversation is about what do people believe is the right size of the government, I don't think we can lose in any way what Alice said, and that is the speed at which we do this. Yes, you want to talk about long-term responsibility, and at one point in this country we had addressed that, and we don't want to lose sight of the immediate problem we have, which is this tremendous need to generate jobs right now.
There's more of the Aaron Harber Show after this. Coming up next.
That's what America is. We're running out of money. Now we got to start thinking. We got to make choices, the hard choices.